Hello, in this video we're going to build a digital asset. To start with, you're going to select everything, and there are two ways of creating a digital asset. Either we can go here and click new digital asset from selection. So when clicking that, we can have this menu, so we can save our digital asset. So we're going to give it a name like tank terminal, and I'm also going to save it directly into my Unity project folder, where I store all my Unity files. So every time I save my file, it will go directly into Unity. And now we have this menu. So in here we can create all the parameters you would like to have in your asset. So again, the easiest way of doing that is, let's say I want to adjust here the base size, which controls how big my space will be to place my models. So I can take one value and drag and drop it in here. Can also take the other one as well and drag them in here. So you can also give it a proper naming and call it overall width and then overall height. So these are the two values that can control how big my system is going to be. Then I would like to create some folders. So we have some structure, and I'm going to create 3 folders, and we can start copy pasting this one. And I'm going to make a folder for screens, also for the tank itself, the tanks, and also for the frame or the cage, the metal cage around it. So here I will go first to my screen settings. And in here, if you remember correctly, we can switch between different styles of screens. And I'm going to take this input and I'm going to drag it here. And I will call it variations. And I also notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variations. So in here, I might need to clamp this value. As you can see, we need to go from 0 to 4. As you can see the lines here. So 0 to 4. So if you have more screens, you can change the number. What would also be nice to have here is that we can actually change also the height of my screen. So I can decide where my screen is coming. So I want this value to be controlled. So I'm going to copy this in here, and I'm going to call it move screen up or down, up or down. So we have that one as well. Then maybe we could add some changes, some parameters for this as well. And one more thing I can do also here is I can take this rotation and drag it also in here. And I can also use this rotation here in this transform here, and I can fill this in my pivot. So, and because we can reference the rotation in here, so my pivot is also now aligned on the correct side. So if I scale it, it's also going to scale correctly. So I would, for example, like to control how much the depth is. So let's say this is the depth of the side panel. And by default, we should fill in a small depth value. So if we go here, minus 1.5 and apply on this, we have a boolean as result. And then we can also expose the scale. So I'm going to expose this. And also here, first of all, I don't want the range to be like this. And I'm going to go to scale side panel. So now we have control in this as well. You can also make a value to bring this piece closer. So what I can do here is at the end I can always place a transform, and then this transform can then sort of fine-tune the position. Better use a center one, center, and then we can use this to fine-tune position or even change scale or rotation if you would like that. But I'm mainly interested here in moving this piece a bit, so I'm going to use this value and I'm going to drag it here and then offset of the side panel. So these are then my values for the screen. You can expose more values if you would like that. Then I can go to the tank, and the tank was here, and I marked the nodes in green, which could be interesting. So I will expose the distance of the green ones. And also I can go back here and expose the radius, so I can control the overall radius. And I'm gonna just go distance 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't want to go in minus, so I'm gonna fill in 0 in here, and that should be okay. Then also here to rotate my tank, so we basically rotate the tank 90 degrees here, and I'm gonna create a toggle here, just rotate tank, and I'm gonna give this a proper name, toggle rotation tank. And when pressing apply, we can now access this in here, so channel rotate tank. We can also build in a overall scale. So here where we merged one of the tanks, we can then also place a transform. And in this transform, I can then have an overall scale value if I would like that. So I'm just going to grab the scale and put it here, and overall scale of the tank. Then also at the bottom here, we can also have this transform to sort of tweak the height or how far they are in the back. So that could also be nice to control. So this is the height. Tank position height. Then I would also like to have to tweak the position of how far it's going. So we'll take this value, I will copy it and zero this out, and then expose this here as well, and call it push back, and apply. And now in here, I will be restoring that original value. So these are then some base settings for controlling the tank, and then next up will be the frame, which was this part. And already I want to first expose how far my frame is going to be. So again, I'm gonna copy this value and zero this out, and then place the value here, and then depth of the cage. And then go back here and then restore the value. So we have the same depth as I have. Then we could also, for example, expose the amount of distance or the amount of beveling. Maybe you want round edges here. By exposing this here, so divisions, bevel. Then further here we also had a system to close certain areas, as you could see. Also one small thing here is that make sure these boxes are big enough in scale. So if this is a bigger piece, so they still boolean out the correct shape. What you could also do is you can link these sizes to the bounding boxes. That could be a better way of automatically scaling up this part. So we're here, I'm gonna click on the switch node and expose this value. And we're going to menu and we're going to create a menu for this. So 0 means that it's open. Then 1 is a closed bottom. And then the second is then closed top. So we have then a small menu to switch between these styles. Then we could also go down further here and start also building in control of this shape. But I think I'm mainly interested in how intense this is going. So like maybe we can also have then this. I'm gonna go back here in the menu and then take this value. And I'm gonna call it side cuts depth. One more thing I would also like to have actually here is that right now everything is closed in one shape. But let's say I want to cut off a certain part of the cage so it's open at the top. So we'll be going back up here to where I created the cage. And in here where I did the first boolean, I would like to merge another shape in it. And I'm just going to merge in a box. And this box can then control, as you could see, where my cage will stop. So if I put it down here, everything should then be deleted there. So I'm going to make also a little bit more room here. And we want to switch this. We don't always want this shape. We can use a null node as empty one. So we can switch between having not a shape or having the shape. In here, I'm also going to automatically scale then this box based on how big the input is. And I will be there for creating a spare input. And in this spare input, I'm going to drag and drop the poly bevel. And now in here, I can ask the bounding boxes of the spare input. And if I type in -1, I will be asking the spare input what the bounding box will be. So then I type in the x size. And I'm going to multiply it by 3, for example. And I will be doing the same here for the z size. And I noticed that it might be a better idea to take this extrusion part and fill this in the spare input so I have a big enough shape. So that is also the reason why I'm using a spare input, because it allows me to easily switch out the input. Then I would also like to have this placed on top. So I'm going to ask the bounding box and fill this in the center. So again, -1, and I'm going to ask the y maximum size. And when this is filled in, the box will be placed on top. So if I would lower the size here, you can see that the box is now placed on top of the cage. So based on the size, so if I fill in 1, we would start cutting off this shape. So in here, I'm going to create a toggle. And this toggle, I'm going to call it cut half. So toggle cut, so we can cut out pieces. And I'm also going to expose, this is then the position of the cut. So pulse, cut. And in here I would link this reference. And by default it should actually be the null node first and then the box. So if I go out of my network for a moment, I can now see all my parameters and I can change the scaling and so on. So what I would like to do is to test out this cut part, and we can see that it's sort of working. We can cut out pieces. So a few things that might have to change is this geometry also needs to be booleaned, and also we don't need these top pieces anymore. So what we can do here is I can here create a boolean, and we could boolean out paste also on this result. So I'm going to subtract this value. So now that part also is going to nicely adjust. Then also these top pieces. So I would go here, and these were the top pieces. So what we could do is copy paste the switch node with the toggle filled in and place it here. So what you could for example do is just fill in a null node, which will return nothing, and then the top part is not shown anymore. Another option you could do is you could, for example, make a variation from this, where these pieces are automatically then, for example, placed here in the back. So one way of automatically placing these details here. So I'm going to reference this piece, which is the out shell, and I'm going to ask the bounds, but I'm also going to increase it. But I'm also going to increase the top part a little bit. So they are placed there, and with the match size, it's then automatically also placed in the correct position. And then what you could do is then switch with the switch node automatically between those two. So if we will go back here and we would change the cut size, we can see that they are also moving nicely with it. And if I disable the cutting operation, we can see that everything is back as it should be. Then last thing, I want to expose this scaling value of the pieces. So scale support piece. And if you set this up already in the other video, where we linked this scale value to the resampling here. So I now can sort of scale these smaller or bigger as you would like that. Now most of our digital asset is in place, and now we can start making changes. So I'm already gonna go in Game Engine and then test this out. Then here we are in Unity, and I have my HJ here, and I can drag and drop it, and then it's going to be calculated. You can also see that again the material is wrong. So we can in Houdini actually assign a default material to be used. So if I would now drag on my material, you can actually see it's not working, and that is because in the end I need to add a proper normal to everything. So let's, for example, take this, and just to be sure, I'm also going to triangulate everything. So we have here these options to do that. And also put down an output here. So this is always the output result. So going back in Unity, we can rebuild the assets, and everything should work now. Then this is then the result in Game Engine. So we have the exact same result and the exact same parameters, as you can see. So we can, for example, make the width higher, and it's automatically updating to what you would like to have. One more also small thing, you might notice that the tool feels responsive, but it can be a little bit faster if you go to here. And I did this before in the other videos, where we went here to the surface detail, the sci-fi surface detail, and we sort of like skipped if we don't need it. So at the moment, everywhere there was a sci-fi detail node, I bypassed it. So now if I would change the values, it's a little bit faster because of the way how the node works. It takes a little bit of time to calculate in real time. So if you have been following the other videos, then the next parts are going to be quite familiar, and we're going to just set up texturing, colliders, and so on to make this game ready. So So that was it for this part. We have set up an HTA and we can control the tool in Unity as well.